Welcome into the official Jets podcast.
I eat, breathe, and sleep the New York Jets, my team.
That is a tightrope walk across Niagara Falls. That's hard to do.
It's a game of inches, so finding that one little inch to be successful, it all matters.
The official Jets podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop game day ready jewelry styles and so much more at kendrascott.com.
Dudes, a lot of things going on. We're a week out from the 2025 NFL Draft. Can you believe it's finally here?
It's crazy, EA. I mean, I remember, being in Indy with you, and I felt like the draft was still so far away. It was like over 2 months away, and literally now we're 7 days away from the 2025 NFL Draft. It's just interesting, right? Because as the NFL schedule has expanded and college has expanded, it feels like everything just kind of runs up on you real quick. But I'm excited, man. 7 days away from guys, realizing their dreams.
Man, there's so many things happening. You just mentioned college schedule. How about the transfer portal and NIL and the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs? But football is king. Football is always king. It's the National Football League, baby. Right now, we're going to get to a couple questions down the line. We had a lot of participation when we put that up on our social media accounts as far as we're going to be taking some questions during the podcast. But as we sit here today, Deuce, number 7 overall, if the Jets stay there, is it amongst 4 players or 5 players that you think ultimately the Jets will be choosing from?
I'm going to say 5.
Okay.
And try to name them for you, right? Armand Membou, the offensive tackle from Missouri. Tetaroa McMillan from Arizona, the receiver. Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. Off chance Mason Graham falls a couple spots. Mason Graham. And I think a dark horse one, and our guy Ethan Greenberg, me and him talked about this one, and this is his dark horse for the number 7 pick. Jalen Walker, I think is a real possibility at the number 7 overall pick for the Jets. Again, it would depend on how the draft board fell in front of the Jets, but a lot of teams are high on him, and I don't believe he gets past pick 8 with the Carolina Panthers. So I believe he's pretty high on the Jets draft board as well.
Wow. Would Will Campbell be in play if he was there at 7?
If the draft goes kind of how I think it will, EA, we all assuming Cam Ward's going number 1 overall. And for all intents and purposes, it seems like Travis Hunter will be the number 2 overall pick. So if you're the Giants right now, they are doing some extensive work on Shedeur Sanders. But I think they would like him later in the draft, maybe a trade back up into the first round. Abdul Carter is a generational type talent. I think it'd be hard for them to pass up on that, right? So assume he goes 3 overall. I think the Patriots should run Will Campbell's card in because he's the most technically sound offensive tackle in this draft. It's literally like he's on easy street at times when he's in pass pro. He makes it look easy at times. I know people will get at the arm length, but again, with offensive line and defensive line play, it's all about angles, right? Offensive tackles, a guy that I went up against in the league that's really good, that's still playing at a high level, Lane Johnson. Yeah, he never gave you the same pass set. He gave you a different angle every time. So, like, when it comes to arm length, depending on your aiming point and how the offensive tackle sets you, that arm length can be mitigated. Those 2 or 3 inches, if you had longer arms, can be kind of mitigated because he understands what his deficiencies are when it comes to the arm length. And Will Campbell does a really good job of giving you different pass sets. And I love the dog mentality that he has. He finishes in the run game. So if you're the Patriots, you're trying to change that culture and get back to your winning ways. I think Will Campbell is a culture-changing piece for you.
So with that being said, you've been saying for months that you think Graham, his likely destination is 5 to Jacksonville. So if you take Campbell off, you take Graham off, then you're left with Membou, Warren, and Walker.
Yeah, and then
McMillan.
the outside chance McMillan. So, yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm going trenches, right? I think putting Armand Membou with our other starting 4 guys would make one of the best young offensive lines in football. And when the Jets had success in 2010, 2011, it was based off of a young, aggressive offensive line, right? So, like, I think that makes the most sense. You have a quarterback that has a rare skill set when it comes to his athletic ability. You have three really good running backs. Aaron Glenn comes from Detroit, where they want to pound you into submission. Tanner Anstring comes from Detroit, where they want to pound you into submission. I just think the writing's on the wall when it comes, if the draft board were to fall like that, EA, that Membou would be the pick.
So we've shrunk the field to four, and you're pointing towards Membu. How much do you consider? Because the Jets are in this situation right now where you're always wanting to go to best player available, but
Yeah,
you want it to marry need at the same time.
correct.
When you look at the Jets offensive line, how much do you factor into the equation the possible flexibility they got in the offseason with the addition of Josh Myers? Because I'm not
Yeah,
saying they want to do this because Darren Muji was very clear about it, that he said that he considers Elijah Vera Tucker a guard. But if you ever get in a situation where you didn't take an offensive lineman there in the first round, you
yeah,
do have the luxury of saying, we do have Myers who can play center. Tippmann does have experience playing guard.
correct.
AVT has experience playing tackle. And another thing is, the wild card in all of this for me is Okorafor,
A
because
hundred
he's got
percent.
a ton of starting experience.
Yeah, and I think that's why they were strategic in the moves they made. We kind of talked about this, EA. They went after guys that maybe didn't have their best career year the year before, but in the past have played really good football. So there's upside there. You talked about a core four, you talked about Josh Myers, and I think that's the reason why they brought those guys in, so they wouldn't feel pigeonholed and feel like we have to take a right tackle with our first pick. But I just think the writing's on the wall. The upside that Membou has, he has the highest upside in this draft, really runs off the football, an athletic offensive tackle that at 330 pounds ran at 491, which is absurd. That lets you know the type of speed and get off he has off the ball, finishes in the run game, and has really good feet. So, like, those are the things you kind of want to check off your board when you're looking at offensive tackles, right? How quick is he off the snap, right? Can he cut guys off on the backside? Can he get to the second level, right? What's his mentality when he gets hands on guys? Does he like to finish guys? We've seen that from Armand Membou. And then the pass pro, is he a fluid athlete, right? Does he have the footwork? And can he sit on power? And Membou can do all those things. Now, people kind of said like he's a shorter built offensive tackles. I think he's like around like 6'3", but his arm length is 33.5-inch arms. And some people were saying even that was short. And I'm like, when did that become short? Right? I thought 32, 31 was shorter. When did 33.5 become shorter arm length? So it never affected him on the film that I watch.
How about two of the top prospects in this draft class? Everybody's talking about their short arms. And listen, the production speaks for itself. I was just watching Mason
Correct.
Graham tape here before we came in. And again, like he just pops all
Yeah.
the time out there. And he is considered the best defensive tackle in a loaded defensive tackle class. Okay, so fans at home might be saying, hey, dudes, good points. But Tyler Warren could help us in the run game. He can help us in the pass game. Maybe he's not going to stretch it vertically like a Bowers, but also factor in the depth chart, dudes. When you look at
Mhm.
Ruckert, Tyler Conklin obviously departed in free agency, and then you bring out Stone Smart, who can
Correct.
stretch it himself. He's probably going to get more opportunities. It's going to be interesting to watch his development. But why? Why maybe you're angling towards Membu as opposed to Warren, because a lot of people on the Warren side would say, hey, listen, he's going to help us in the run game, dude. And maybe he's not going to be
100%.
Bowers, but he's going to be a productive pass catcher.
Yeah, you know I love Tyler Warren. The NFL, though, is based off of facts and what we've seen in the past, right? They like to follow the trends, is if I could put it that way. And I'm a big proponent of never rank or put somebody in a certain position because they play a certain position, right? But history does have facts, and there is a graphic that shows you that positional value is real. When it comes to taking guys in the top 10, those are usually offensive tackles, guys that can affect the quarterback, guys that can throw the ball, which are quarterbacks, and guys that catch the ball from quarterbacks, because those are the guys that can immediately affect the game. I look at the history and going back since 2014, I believe there's been 3 tight ends that went in the top 10.
Hmm.
Can you name them? I can name them, but can you name them, EA?
Can I name them? I would say you're catching me off guard right now. Oh, went in top 10? Oh, Pitts.
Yeah.
Obviously, was Bowers top 10?
No.
No,
Yeah. No,
he
he
wa
was 11.
no, he wasn't. He wasn't because the Jets had him on the
Exactly.
board.
No, he might have been. He actually might have been 12, if I'm not mistaken.
Hold it, Pitts? Oh, man. I'm struggling
I'll give
now.
you a hint. One was a tight end from North Carolina.
North Carolina tight
Eric
end.
Ebron
Oh my god.
and TJ
Okay.
Hawkinson.
Okay.
Do you see where I'm going here?
I see. That's a good one, man. You
Positional.
stumped me. The Ebron one, nobody's getting unless they studied this one coming in.
So this is my thing. I love Tyler Warren, and again, I'm a big proponent of never because the argument with the running back position with Jameer Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. My thing is those are special athletic guys that are going to touch the ball at least 20 times a game, right? So they're going to have a bigger impact on the game. I'm just leery of taking a tight end in the top 10 because what's his true impact on every single play, right? If you're lucky, Tyler Warren touches it, 7 times a game? He's going to affect the run game for sure. But do you take that in the top 7 rather than taking an offensive lineman who is going to have a big impact and is going to play every single snap for you on offense? That's where I'm going. And I love Tyler Warren. And the people will say, well, he's probably the most versatile offensive piece in this draft. And you're right. The guy can play quarterback. He can play tight end. He can play H-back. They had him at center one time versus USC. He snapped the ball, ran down the seam, and caught a touchdown. I hear all that, but the NFL follows trends, right? And I'm just leery of taking a tight end in the top 10 just because of the history that I just told you about, EA. Eric Ebron, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts. And TJ Hawkinson's a really good player. He's a Pro Bowl player. But let's not forget, he got traded within the division. That's what Detroit thought of him. They traded him within the division. So, again, I'm just leery of taking a guy in the top 10 at that position.
Yeah, they traded him to the Vikings inside the division. And to your point about Hawkinson, he was a top 10 pick of the Lions, but that was the previous staff. That was not the Dan Campbell,
Correct.
Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn staff. Okay.
Uh,
So he was drafted in the top 10 by the previous staff. And
Yeah.
also, I guess we should take this into consideration that a very productive tight end in Detroit right now is a guy by the name of Sam Laporta, who went to
Correct.
tight end U, Iowa, but was a second-round pick.
And that's where the value usually is for tight ends, right? Like now, if they're special, you take them in the back of the first, but that's usually the value, second, third, fourth round for tight ends.
Man, you really stumped me with that question. That was great, though. Okay, so top of the draft, are we heading towards a scenario where, okay, Ward's going 1, but 2, 3, those teams are going to stick there. They're not taking quarterbacks. They might take quarterbacks later in the first round. They may take quarterbacks in the second round, but they're not taking quarterbacks. Are we there right now, or are you watching what
I
the
think
Giants
I
are
think
doing?
the Giants are a dark horse, to be
Yep.
honest with you. Now, again, I don't see them passing up on Abdul Carter. I thought it was interesting on his Instagram the other day. He posted a picture of what's the LT? He posted a picture of LT the other day. So in his Giants uniform at that. So I think that was a little bit of a foreshadow
Yep.
potentially. I think he kind of knows that Cleveland's leaning towards Travis Hunter,
But
and
you're
most
not
likely he
closing the book
goes
on
3.
Shedeur Sanders yet.
I'm not because this was a scenario like last year, and people looked at me crazy when I said this. I talked to a few people from the Atlanta organization, and they had done extensive work on Michael Penix Jr.
Mm.
And they flew out to Seattle and worked him out. Like the whole brash was there. And usually teams, when they do that, it's just not part of the process. Like they're really considering. And I think the thing with Shedeur is, I think they're just trying to get to know the guy again. Now, again, I don't know if they like him at number 3, but maybe there's a scenario where they try to trade back in the first round. Say he gets past like pick 9 or 10. Maybe they try to trade back into the first round. Now, New Orleans needs a quarterback, so I don't know if he'll get past 9. But I think there's a real scenario that the Giants try to get aggressive and trade back in. And they also, did another workout with Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shuck, just in case. I think plan B, if Shador is gone, who's some guys we can maybe target in the second and third round?
Okay, we got a lot of fan questions to get to, but before we go there, I want to talk about some potential trade up, trade down scenarios. This is something that we covered on Jets Overtime, our NFL mock draft, which is going to air Saturday night CBS. Shameless plug,
Mm.
11:30 p.m. You also can check that out on NewYorkJets.com and YouTube. My man Dooz was on the show, as was the great Brian Baldinger, Caroline Hendershot, and Ethan Greenberg. We're discussing all things draft. If you missed the first Jets Overtime, our NFL draft preview, that you can check out on NewYorkJets.com or YouTube. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying that's so improbable that let's not even talk about that. Any scenario any scenario there where the Jets would be like, we really like Graham, so we'd like to get up to 5 to Jacksonville, or you just think Jacksonville for months, as you've said, they're going there and they're not moving.
I don't think this is a sure bet that they take Graham, just
Oh,
because Liam Cohen's an offensive coach, right? So he would probably like an offensive weapon. And I actually posted this question the other day on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I said, is there a scenario where Tyler Warren goes 5 overall? And how does that affect the Jets?
mm,
Because what if their decision is between Mason Graham and Armand Membou? Which direction do they go? Right? Because again, Liam Cohen, he's coming from Tampa Bay. And the thing that's so great about him is he's been able to kind of change his philosophy based on the personnel. Because let's not forget, Chris Godwin was having literally an all pro year before he got hurt. And then they kind of had to switch to more of a running team at that time. And that's when Bucky Urban and Sean Tucker really came alive in that offense. And then also Kate Otten, once Chris got hurt, became a real benefactor of that the last 8 games of the season, and he had a career year. So I'm like, when you look at Jacksonville and the way it's currently constructed, right? They went and got De'Ami Brown from the Commanders, who's a real high flyer that can go up and get the ball. Really played well down the stretch for the Commanders last year on their way to the NFC Championship game.
yep.
They also have Gabe Davis, who was coming off an injury, who was kind of up and down last year, and they have BTJ, who we know can blow the top off the defense, and it's clearly their number one option at receiver. Let's not forget, though, they lost their tight end. They released him this offseason, Evan Ingram. So Britton Strange is supposed to be the guy, but what if, Liam Cohen says, I like that other tight end from Penn State. I know they played together, him and Britton Strange, but I like that other guy,
Wow.
Tyler Warren. Let's potentially take him and give ourselves an offensive weapon.
Man, that would be a big time curve. But okay.
Mm.
But in terms of the Jets, do you have those guys, how we started the pod, those 4, do you have them stacked really tightly together whereas you're not going up no matter what? You're staying there at 7. We'll get to the trade down scenarios here in a second, but you're not going up no matter what.
No. I talked about this on our Jets Overtime show as well. I don't think the drop off between Mason Graham and Walter Nolan is that significant. And this is a deep defensive tackle class. So, like, I don't see a scenario where the Jets, say Mason Graham gets past 5. They're like, oh, let's trade up one spot with the Raiders to go get him, because they know they're going to get a good quality player at 7 regardless. That's going to be an immediate impact player for them in year 1. So I just don't see a scenario where the Jets go, let's potentially move up. Unless a guy like Abdul Carter fell, which I think everybody in the league would be calling. I don't think he gets past pick 4 at the
Okay,
worst.
real quickly. What if Membou is gone too? What if Campbell and Membou are gone?
I mean, that would be literally out of left field, like
Right.
literally out of left field, EA. Um, but in and this is the funny thing. I'm so glad you asked me this question, because people are so quick to say we should trade down. You got to have a partner that's willing to trade up
That's right.
for you to trade down. And usually teams only trade up mostly for quarterbacks or generational talents. And literally, to me, right now in this draft, there's probably 3 generational talents. It's Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Ashton Genty. And all 3 of those guys most likely will be gone by the time Jets are picking at 7.
Okay, so Genty, I'm so happy you made the transition there because we're jumping all over the place, but this is why the draft is so much fun.
Yeah.
If the Raiders don't take Genty at 6, Will
Yeah.
teams be calling the Jets at 7 to take him?
I think the team that picks right behind the Jets would call right away. The Chicago Bears. I think they would call in a heartbeat. Now, again, this is a deep running back class, and maybe Ben Johnson feels like there's no chance to get him because there's no way he's getting past the Raiders. But if that were to happen, I guarantee Ryan Poles would be on the phone with Darren Muji right after that pick at 6 if Ashton Gentry's still on the board at 7. It'd be interesting to see what Carolina does because yes, they just paid Chuba Hubbard, but again, Genty's a different type of talent. When we talk about a generational running back, and we saw how good Bijan Robinson has been, and also Jahmyr Gibbs with the Detroit Lions. So I think a few teams would call. Maybe Denver calls, tries to move up. But I know that team right behind the Jets at 8 would definitely call. And maybe it's a similar trade. And again, I don't see him getting past 6, but maybe it's a similar trade that they did last year when the Minnesota Vikings just moved one spot up to get JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, because I think that'd be fascinating if he got past 6. What's the
Correct.
scenario, and what would Muj's phone be like? You'd
Mhm.
have to be using multiple phones in the draft room because, to your point,
Correct.
the way you view it is there's 3 game-changing talents or franchise-changing talents, and you're including Genty into the mix. And
Without a
typically,
doubt.
we don't see teams take a running back in the top 10, but this is the year where probably an anomaly where you're going to have a running back go in the top 10, even though it's historically good class, right?
Correct. And the funny thing is, they were showing some behind the scenes of the Detroit Lions brass when they took Jameer. Because let's not forget they traded back that year, so they were nervous that a team was going to take him. They had him as like a top 5 player on their draft board, so they would have been willing to take him at like 8. But they figured like, let's get some draft capital because guys are going to move up to get other players. I don't think they view Jameer how we view him, right? So that's the thing. Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson, like how do they view Genty? Is he generational like he is in my eyes? Like, are they willing to call it Jets and be like, yo, we'll give you a third just to move up one spot to get this guy?
Yeah. What do you make of the Jets wide receiver room? We got an alpha, you got a stud, you got a game breaking talent in Garrett Wilson. You add Josh Reynolds in free agency. Guy's
Correct.
got a lot of system familiarity going back to his days in Detroit. He played in Denver last year, so he's got relationships with both Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji. And then off, a lot of people thought that, hey, Alan Lazard's likely to be released, but he was restructured, so
Yeah.
he's back. You got a couple young guys. I'm not closing the book on Malachi Corley. I think that would be
You
foolhardy.
can't after 1 year. You
Yeah,
can't.
exactly, exactly. And you got the X-Man coming back as well. What do you make of the wide receiver room? How much of a need is it early in the draft?
Yeah, I think it's a need. I think when it comes down to it, you're probably going to look to see if you can solidify your number 2 spot. Now, can Josh Reynolds be a guy that solidifies the number 2 spot? Can Alan Lazard step up and be a guy that's maybe your 2 or 3? Another guy that's a dark horse that I really like, Tyler Johnson. I think he could be a dark horse on this team
Yeah, that was a
in
good ad.
regards
Yep.
to be, yeah, in regards because I feel like every time a team is called upon him, whether it's in Tampa, whether it's at the Rams, he's made plays. Like he just makes plays when he's called upon. So I think he can be a dark horse guy that potentially battles for like that number 3, maybe 4 receiver spot. But every once in a while, if say somebody gets dinged up, you can rely on him because he has a track record of making plays in his past. So I think it is a area they'll target in the 2nd or 3rd round. And I think that's really where the great value for receivers. Like people haven't been as high on this receiver class. I'm telling you right now, EA, in that 2nd, 3rd round, there's going to be some really good value. And there's going to be some guys that will be solid number 2s for a long time in the NFL.
The official Jets podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop game day ready jewelry styles and so much more at kendrascott.com.
That's something to keep in mind. All right, you ready for some questions? Here we go. We got a bunch to
Let's
get.
do it.
Tall Sean writes in, if the Jets draft Warren, is it mandatory they draft an offensive lineman with their 2nd pick? Is it a choice between Xavier? If it's a choice between Xavier Watts, the Notre Dame safety, of course, and right tackle 5, who are you taking and why?
Right tackle 5 might get in get in the first round. That's like Josh Cornerly or Josh or Simmons from Ohio State. So
Yep.
depending on how you have them on your board, I think both of those guys get in the back of the first round. So now you're talking about like offensive tackle 6. And I'm so glad he brought that up, because I've been pounding the table saying safety is not even an underrated need. It's a major need on this team. Just the way that this roster is constructed, right? We have a lot of free safeties. I think Watts is a guy that can live in the box. I talked about Andrew Makubo on our Jets Overtime show. He's a guy I think can live in the box. I think it's interesting. It just depends on the value um, of your big board and where you have guys slotted, right? Do you have maybe the fifth or sixth offensive tackle slated higher than Xavier Watts? Does a guy like Malachi Starks, does he fall to the second round? Like, these are the things that you have to consider when it comes to your big board and where you want to slot guys. I think there'll be some good offensive tackles that even go in the third round. Like a guy like Ozzie Trapillo is a guy
Yep.
from Boston College that could potentially go in the third round, and that would be great value to get him in the third round. I know people are high on Ariante Ezeri. He's
From
probably going to go
Minnesota.
in the second round. Yeah, exactly, from Minnesota. But could he actually make that transition to right tackle? The thing is, he's so tall. At times he struggles with guys that play with leverage, because when you're like 6'6", it's hard to bend, right? So that's where you have to weigh the options in regards to if you do go Tyler Warren in the first round, which I love Tyler Warren. I just don't see it happening just
That's
because of
why
positional value.
you're going to the offensive line in the first round.
Correct,
That
100%.
that's
I would
huge.
always build through the trenches before anything else. You just have to weigh where you have a guy like Watts, Makuba, or even Starks if he falls to the second round, compared to where you have your fifth or sixth offensive tackle.
I love Starks. I will say this, and maybe this is a hot take. Watts could be there in round 3.
That's usually the good value of safety positions is the back of the second round, third. Like, usually the top safeties go in the second round. It's rare these days for safeties, unless they're just game changing, to go in the first round, right? It's like it happens, but it does. Like, I think last year's first safety was Tyler Nubin. He went in the second round, right?
Iman
That's
Wari.
literally where Eamon Moore, I think, will go in the first round because he is a cyborg. He's a different type of dude. Um, and I think Starks has a really good chance. I think the Eagles make a lot of sense at 32. So you could get two safeties go in the first round, and then there's a guy like Watts maybe slide to the middle of the second round. Does Makuba slide to the middle of the second round or even third round? Like, those are the questions you have to ask yourselves, because those are probably the two next guys after those two top safeties go.
All right, so this is at Drew G03. Why is it so difficult to develop quarterbacks and evaluate them effectively? I think if anybody had the answer on that, they'd be very rich.
Yeah, I saw this question last night when I was going through my Twitter, and that's the interesting thing. Like, fit matters, coaching matters, right? Um, the funny thing is, and I've stated this before, EA, when it comes to quarterback development, a lot of times too many coaches try to make a player fit their system, instead of really highlighting what the player does well. And that's where you get in trouble and people call people bust. But it's like, no, you drafted this dude based off what he does, but now you're trying to make him do something else. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. So, like, a lot of times that's what it is, right? Going to the right place. And like, sometimes I tell guys, it's better not to go in the first round. You want to be like a Jalen Hurts and go in the second round and go to the right fit. A guy that's going to get a Shane Steichen, a guy that's going to coach you up and use your skill set specifically. That way you have success. I think that's the biggest thing for Jalen Milroe. I know he got invited to Green Bay, which, if you're invited to the draft, a lot of times maybe you are getting some talk that you could go first round, maybe early second. But for him, to me, I wouldn't even mind going in the third if it's to the right team that's going to develop me, because that's the most important thing ever. Plus, there's that added pressure when you go in the first. People assume you're going to be the savior. When it's kind of crazy, before my year in 2008, quarterbacks sat for like a year, and some sat for like 2 or 3 years. It
Yeah.
wasn't until '08, my class, right, when we had Matty Ice, and then we had Joe Flacco. Those guys played as rookies, and then now the rest of the league is like, well, that's the blueprint. No, that should not be the blueprint, because not every quarterback is created equal. Some guys need time to develop so they can have success.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the draft, I think, heading into it, is that everybody views these guys as finished products. The good
Yeah,
teams are taking players that are talented, that have a very good mental skill set, but they're not finished products, and they're bringing them into their building and they're coaching them up and they're developing them at all positions. And oh, by the way, playing quarterback at the National Football League and playing quarterback at the college level, they're totally different sports. I mean, we're watching college quarterbacks a lot of times look to the sideline for the play. They're not
Yeah.
y- they're not analyzing what's happening at the line of scrimmage. They're taking the ball, and oftentimes you see quarterbacks that have a lot of success too. They're not asked to do too much reading. It's that first progression and just get rid of the ball. That's it. This is a
And
different game on this level.
I'm so glad you brought that up, EA. And I think there's been a detriment to college quarterbacks because of that. And it's because these college coaches are nervous of losing their jobs, right? There's a lot of half field reads. Like, we're going to make it easy. That way, the first or second read is open. If not, take off with the football, right? So, as far as development, these young guys don't get that because the college coach is so worried about that guy making mistakes and potentially losing games that it could equate to them losing their job. So, like, they're like, it's more important for me to, even if it's a gimmick offense, for us to get wins than to actually develop guys for the pro game. And that's why I think there's been a drop off when it comes to a lot of these quarterbacks, because a lot of times back in the day, coaches would allow players to go through their growing pains, right? Because if they knew that they were going to be a really good prospect down the road and they knew they had job security, like, if I know I'm going to be here for minimum 2 or 3, 4 years, I can allow this guy in his first year to make mistakes. But now that's not the case because, with boosters and NIL, like these teams will buy your contract out and allow you to go see greener pastures and bring somebody else in. So I think that's been the biggest issue when it comes to development of the college quarterback. Again, they don't get full field reads, a lot of half field reads where, like, these two routes over here are dead, they're not even on, and just that guy's going to be open. We're going to make sure he's open based off what we see the defense do. Like you said, quarterbacks look to the sideline and the coach is in their ear saying, well, this is what they're in. They're in quarters defense. That flat route should be open. Like, throw it when he's open.
Right. Another problem with the portal, and we could talk about this forever, is that they don't even have continuity in school. So if they're playing
Man,
in one system for 1 year, then they're going to another school. They're picking up a new system. There's guys that are hard to develop. I mean, hard to analyze in terms of your draft prep. Like Jackson Dart, for instance. Listen, he's a wonderful athlete and he did a lot of good things at college. And I'm not taking a shot at the kid. I'm just saying, using him for an example, he plays with a very good offensive signal caller in Lane Kiffin, and he's tremendously athletic. But what he did in college and what he's going to do in the NFL, it's totally different.
yeah, and that's why the Senior Bowl was important for him because, one, doesn't really take snaps under center. He had to do that at the Senior Bowl, and then also now, instead of those half field reads I was talking about, which Ole Miss runs a lot of, you got to go through full progressions, right? And I actually thought he really asserted himself well at the Senior Bowl because that was his biggest question. EA, like, he's in a gimmicky offense that doesn't really translate to the NFL. So how do we really, scout this guy and what's his ceiling like? Because he actually hasn't been asked to do this in college. Like, where is our faith level that we can teach him to read these full progressions? One thing I will tell you is he's one of the toughest quarterbacks in this draft because he will
He's
stay in and
tough.
take a hit and throw the ball.
He's tough. He's tough. He's got a big arm. He's a winner. And you're right. You were there. You reported on it as it was happening. That really helped his stock, what he did at the
Correct.
Senior Bowl. But you're talking about a couple days. You're talking about a couple days. Is he going to go in the first round?
It's crazy. Like, my thing is that if Shador goes top 10, I think there's a good chance that Jackson Dart does go in the first round. Like, you know me, yeah, I love him. I would be comfortable taking him in the second round, but this quarterbacks get pushed up, and there's quarterback needy teams. And now with the conundrum with the Pittsburgh Steelers, could this be another scenario? The crazy thing is, a lot of people have likened Jackson Dart to Kenny Pickett. I don't see it, but
Yeah.
would that be interesting for them to take Jackson Dart at 21 after taking a guy like Kenny Pickett a few years before that?
should we give him a hint of what's to come on Jets overtime? You said as far as a developmental passer, if the Jets are going to be looking at one, maybe on day 2, day 3, they're fine up top. You got
Mm.
Justin Fields, you got Tyrod Taylor, but from a developmental perspective, you want where again?
I went Jalen Milroe. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if he's there in the third round. But again, he got invited to the draft party, so like he may be gone into because his traits are out of this world. EA, when you talk about the athletic ability, like he is an elite athlete. Like you turn on at Georgia game, you turn on the LSU game, and in both of those games, a lot of those players are going in the first round. He might have been the best player on the field that day in
Mm.
both of those games, which says a lot about Jalen Milroe. But that's the thing. His highs are very high, but his lows are low. When you go like to that Michigan game, it just wasn't good. That Oklahoma game, it just wasn't good at all. And he has a big arm. He can throw the ball down the field really well. We saw that with the freshman phenom Ryan Williams, blowing the top off the defense down there at Alabama, but he struggles with the layer throws and the intermediate throws. And that to me, I always give a baseball analogy. Like quarterback plays singles and doubles. Like you got to hit the singles and doubles. Like that's where you're gonna live. And he struggles with a lot of the doubles, right? So that's where he has to get better. And I sat down with the kid at the combine. Great kid. His teammates love him. And he wants to work on his game. Like that's the thing. I asked him. Like people always ask, prospects, what can you do for us? I asked him, what do you want a team to do for you? Right? Because I think that's important for a prospect that's going to a team. I need to know I'm going to be developed. And that was his biggest thing. He was like, coach me hard because you see something in me. He's like, I'm from a military background. I had Nick Saban. I only know how to get coached hard. He was like, that's the thing. Pour everything into me because I want to get better. And I love that answer from him because, again, people always ask, what can you do for the team? But at the end of the day, we talked about this earlier, EA, when it comes to potential draft bust at the quarterback position. Like, how are you developing this kid once you bring him into the building?
Mm-hmm. Gus asks, we're gonna go rapid fire right now, Deuce. If the Jets trade
Okay.
down, how far do you think they would be prepared to drop?
Again, yeah, you got to have a trade partner. I just don't think this is the draft where that happens. But for them to make sure they still get like a blue collar, blue chip player, I could see them not trading past pick 11.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
How about a danger zone? Tackles on day 2 that we could target. How to balance needing to take a guy now versus flipping a pick into next year like we did last year.
Yeah. And we talked about this earlier. EA say they take Tyler Warren. Do they go offensive tackle and on the second day? I'll give you a couple. Anthony Belton is a guy that I like. I think he can make the transition from NC State to right tackle if you needed him. Big physical offensive tackle that for his size actually moves really well. He makes a lot of sense. I already talked about Ozzy Trapillo. He makes a lot of sense if he's there in the second round. Say they trade back in the second round or even in the third round. Those are two guys I think that make a lot of sense for the Jets if they were to take a tackle on day 2.
Love it. Boy Green, predict what position the Jets will take earlier than anyone is expecting.
Safety.
Yep. Yep.
Safety.
And
That's the one. I think maybe second round.
Nick asks, do you think the heavy emphasis in the draft cycle has on the first round creates too great a misconception in fans' mind of a talent disparity between there and subsequent rounds? Do you think the heavy emphasis in the draft cycle on the first round creates too great a misconception in fans' mind, the talent disparity between the first round and subsequent rounds?
That's actually a really good question. I just think it depends on the draft year. So like in this year, I would say when it comes to running back, defensive tackle, nah, because like you guys should be definitely locked into rounds like 2, 3, and 4 because there's going to be some quality starters in those rounds, right? So, but in certain position groups for sure, like I think there's a big drop off in the first round when it comes to corners and corners that could potentially go in the second or third round. And honestly, EA, when you look at the corner position, it's going to get pretty dry after midway through the third round. So I can see those guys getting pushed up just because of the lack of depth. Like there'll be some quality guys, maybe like nickel guys in the fourth, fifth round, but the quality of corner is going to drop off significantly midway through the third round.
You
So you
talking
have
about
to, this year, in this draft, this year.
yeah, yeah, it's a good point about the position groups because when we talk about the
Correct.
draft, it's not the same for every position groups. Because
No,
you
exactly.
you were just tweeting about it before we came on that hey, you like some of the interior offensive linemen in the second,
Correct.
the fourth rounds. I mean, this running back class has a lot of depth. I mean, the tight end group goes well beyond Warren this year, and then
Correct.
it and then the feature group, of course, is defensive tackles and defensive line this year. Jim Jets, what's a long shot that no one's thinking of we could take? Could be any round. Good question. A long
I
shot.
mean, the long shot, I'll give you one in the first round. We talked about it earlier, EA, it's Jalen Walker.
Yep.
I just think he reminds me of a guy that the Jets had. And I know they're kicking themselves. They let walk out the door, and Carolina had. And I know they're kicking themselves. They let him walk out the door. Frankie Louvu. That's what he reminds me of. An off-ball linebacker that can rush on third down and could be multiple in regards to how versatile he is on defense. That's a chess piece that Aaron Glenn could use in a multitude of ways. Right? He could play on the edge. He could play off-ball linebacker for you, especially in those three set line when we had the three linebackers in a traditional 4-3. Say a team comes out in 12 personnel with two tight ends, he could be the guy on the edge as that Sam backer. And then on third down, you put him outside and you maybe make Jermaine the Joker inside and you have Will on the other side. I think that is kind of appeasing to a guy like Aaron Glenn.
Oh man, that's a hell of a comparison. Frankie Louvu playing with his hair.
That's what
on
I saw
fire.
when I saw his tape.
Yeah. Hey man, this is a lot of fun. I think we're gonna try to catch up before the draft next week because we got to get you a final mock.
I love it. Full Jets final mock for all 7 rounds.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks, dudes.